Hi kids, how is everybody? It's Aunt Molly. I'm doing okay. How are you? Good. Good to hear. I um I got up this morning on time and I wrote my list out and been working diligently on my list. I'm finding that I'm fighting a little bit of apathy right now because there aren't events to go to. There aren't it's a little odd. So my to-do list has helped me quite a bit to help me kind of keep motivated. So I'm going to try and do 3 or 4 more things on my list tonight before I go to bed. But one of them was spending story time with you. So I'm really not up for a crazy hat or a costume or anything today, but that's okay too. The main thing is that you and I spend that you and I spend story time together. I had taped something and it came untaped and went boop and kind of shocked me a little. But anyway, but it's just important that you and I spend story time together. And I've got this new story I'm reading from Grimm's. Well, it's not new; it's quite old, but it's new to me. It's called The Raven. So we'll do a couple of pages of The Raven. I have not vetted these stories before I read them, so I'm going to find out the endings at the same time you are. And sometimes they may be a little bit of a surprise, and sometimes maybe not. But anyway, without further ado, we'll put on some glasses. Check. And got Raggedy, check, and we'll do a little bit of story time, okay? So here we go, all right? So, again, and it is now too late for me to save her. Then his eyes fell on things which were lying beside him. He read the letter and knew from all that had happened. He rose up without delay, eager to start on his way and to reach the castle of Stromberg, but he had no idea in which direction he ought to go. He traveled about a long time in search of it and came at last to a dark forest, through which he went on walking for 14 days and still could not find a way out. Once more the night came on, and worn out, he lay down under a bush and fell asleep. Again the next day he pursued his way through the forest, and that evening, thinking to rest again, he lay down as before, but he heard such a howling and wailing that he found it impossible to sleep. He waited until it was darker and people had begun to light up their houses, and then seeing a little glimmer ahead of him, he went towards it. He found that the light came from a house which looked smaller than it really was, from the contrast of its height with that of an immense giant who stood, whoop, that caught me off guard, an immense giant who stood in front of it. He thought to himself, if the giant sees me going in, my life will not be worth much. However, after a while, he summoned up courage and went forward. When the giant saw him, he called out, it is lucky for that you have come, for I have not had anything to eat for a long time. I can now have you for supper. I would rather you let that alone, said the man, for I do not willingly give myself up to be eaten. If you're wanting food, I have enough to satisfy your hunger. If that is so, said the giant, I will leave you in peace. I only thought of eating you because I had nothing else. So they went indoors together and sat down, and the man brought out the bread, meat, and wine, which, although he had eaten and drunk of them, were still unconsumed. The giant was pleased with the good cheer, and ate and drank to his heart's content. When he had finished his supper, the man asked him if he could direct him to the castle of Stromberg. The giant said, I will look on my map. On it are marked the towns, villages, and houses. So he fetched his map and looked for the castle, but could not find it. Never mind, he said, I have larger maps upstairs in the cupboard, and we will look on those. But they searched in vain, for the castle was not even marked on those. The man now thought he should like to continue his journey, but the giant begged him to remain for a day or two longer until the return of his brother, who was away in search of provisions, that means supplies. When the brother came home, they asked him about the castle of Stromberg, and he told them he would look on his own maps as soon as he'd eaten and appeased his hunger. Accordingly, when he had finished his supper, they all went up together to his room and looked through his maps, but the castle was not to be found. Then he fetched other older maps, and they went on looking for the castle until at last they found it, but it was many thousands of miles away. "How shall I be able to get there?" asked the man. I have 2 hours to spare." "Oh, I have 2 hours to spare," said the giant, "and I will carry you into the neighborhood of the castle. I must then return to look after the child who's in our care." The giant thereupon carried the man to within about 100 leagues of the castle, where he left him, saying, "You will be able to walk the remainder of the way yourself." I just assume giants have big, deep voices, which I don't even have, but I'm just assuming that. The man journeyed on day and night until he reached the golden castle of Stromberg. Can you make a big, deep voice like a giant and go, "You will be able to walk the remainder of the way yourself"? Can you do that in your giant voice? Okay, well, I was just checking. He found it. The man journeyed on day and night until he reached the golden castle of Stromberg. He found it situated. Sorry, my nose itches. I know I'm touching my face. My hands are clean. He found it situated, however, on a glass mountain. Wow. And looking up from the foot, he saw an enchanted maiden drive around her castle and then go inside. He was overjoyed to see her and longed to get to the top of the mountain, but the sides were so slippery that every time he attempted to climb, he fell back again. And when he saw that it was impossible, let me see how I'm doing on time. All right. When he saw that it was impossible to reach her, he was greatly grieved and said to himself, "I will remain here and wait for her." So he built himself a little hut, and there he sat and watched for a whole year. And every day he saw the king's daughter driving around her castle, but was still unable to get nearer to her. I think I'll read like one more paragraph. It's long, but I'll read that, okay? Looking out from his hut, he saw 3 robbers fighting, and he called out to them, "God be with you." They stopped when they heard the call, but looking around and seeing nobody, they went on with their fighting, which now became more furious. "God be with you," he cried again, and again they paused and looked about, but seeing no one, went back to their fighting. A third time he called out, "God be with you," and then thinking he should like to know the cause of the dispute between the 3 men, he went out and asked them why they were fighting so angrily with one another. One of them said that he thought he had found a stick, and that he had to but strike it against any door through which he wished to pass, and it immediately would fly open. Another told him that he had found a cloak which rendered its wearer invisible, and the third thought a horse which would carry its rider over any obstacle and even up the glass mountain was the thing he had found. They had been unable to decide whether they would keep together and have the things in common, or whether they would separate. On hearing this, the man said, "I will give you something in exchange for those 3 things. Not money, for that I have not got, but something that is of far more value. I must first, however, prove whether all of you have told me about your 3 things is prove whether all that you have told me about your 3 things is true." The word "that" was missing there. The robbers therefore made him get on the horse and handed him the stick and the cloak, and when he had put this round him, he was no longer visible. Then he fell upon them with the stick and beat them one after the other, crying, "There, you idle vagabonds! You have got what you deserved. Are you satisfied now?" That's not even right. He should have at least given them some of the food, even if they were robbers. Maybe I'm wrong there. I don't know. But that's where we're going to stop for today. And I enjoyed having story time with you. And I'll see you next time. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay? I'm going to keep this up through the quarantine. I'm going to try. Okay? All right. Love you guys. Have a good night. Mwah. Raggedy sends her hugs and kisses too. Ready, Raggedy? Mwah. Good night.